Okay, so I recently helped a friend buy his first property, and I thought most people knew this, and apparently people don't. So this video is going to be helping you today if you are trying to buy your first or your next property. So buying property is something that for many South Africans feels like something that it's like the next step, right? You're just like, okay, you've been renting for a little while, and now it's time to buy a house. I'm going to be talking you through the process of trying to decide what kind of property you should buy, the different types of properties that you can get, and then all the costs and the process that are involved in buying a property. If you are new here, hi, my name is Nyaki, and I teach people how to make money, but also how to make money babies on the internet. And sometimes I talk about how to spend that money, because what's the point of making all this money if it's just going to sit there in your bank account, making money babies, which is ultimately the dream. So buying your first property is something that, again, is something, it's a lot of us are just like, yes, we want to own a house or we want to buy an investment property, but where to start? So the first thing that you need to understand when you are buying a property, and I heard someone say this once, is that a bond is the lowest you'll ever pay and rent is the highest you'll ever pay. So in terms of affordability, your bond repayment is going to be the lowest money you will ever pay towards your house. You cannot pay less than your bond installment, but you can always pay more. Similarly, for your rental is always going to be the highest most times that you will pay. You will generally not pay much higher than your rental in terms of your accommodation. So think about that when you are planning your affordability. If I leave you with nothing, leave with that. So you've established that you are keen, you earn a good salary, stable salary, and that you are definitely jumping into the home ownership bucket. So the first thing is, if it's your first property, you are exempt from certain taxes. If it's your second property, there are certain hoops that you need to kind of jump into when you're selling, but we're not going to talk about that right now. We're just going to be talking about the process of buying a property. So there are obviously different types of properties that you can buy. I'm going to talk about two. So the first one is called a freehold, and then the second one is called a sectional title or a sectional hold. So sectional title is when you buy a piece of property, either in a complex or in an estate, or not an estate, but in a complex that is shared communal living, right? So you own a property, but it forms part of a larger estate, and therefore you share things like your levies. You may hear people talk about levies. I'll talk to what that is in a minute. You'll talk about levies. You'll share common spaces, and generally you will have what the body corporate is the governing body of that estate. A body corporate is usually made up of homeowners, and the group of homeowners, depending on how many they are, then will have certain rights and certain obligations to maintain the group property, right? So all the houses. This is for sectional title. Sectional titles generally will have levies. Levies are the monies that you will pay for maintenance. So levies usually cover your insurance of the actual structure of the building. Usually will cover gardens, paving, all kinds of shared facilities. If there's a swimming pool, if there's a tennis court, that's generally what your levies cover. For sectional title, the rule for most of the time is if you are going to take your wall, right, and cut it into half, the body corporate owns this side or is responsible of the outside of the property, and then you are responsible for anything inside. So you literally cut your wall in half, and you are responsible for anything inside, and they're responsible for anything outside. So things like walls, cracked walls. If it's a crack inside of the house, it's your crack. If it's a crack on the outside of the property, then it's built by body, and it's been built by body corporate, then you are liable for body corporate. So the reason why I didn't want to include estates into this is because generally estates, so if it's just your house that you live in and it's very different to everybody else's, usually that's the tell, you will still maybe pay levies, but you are responsible entirely for your house. So that's kind of like a freehold within an estate. That's very different. That's a very different ownership structure. For sectional title, though, you are subject to a body corporate, and that body corporate is generally responsible for the building, right? So they take responsibility of the building. You buy it, it's yours, and so you are absorbed in as a trustee in that development or that sectional title. When buying in a sectional title, there are things that you need to be aware of because you're buying in a group, right? Think of it as like a stokvel of houses. What you want to make sure when you are buying in a sectional title is that the sectional title itself is in good standing, right? So what happens with the sectional title is that because it's like a company that has been formed or a body or a committee that's been formed, you need to have regular meetings to discuss finances, to discuss maintenance, to discuss wear and tear, to discuss new projects. And all of those things happen around an AGM unless they have other special meetings in between, right? So your AGM, is also going to be the place where your finances as the body corporate are discussed. Remember, you are all paying levies, whether it's 500 Rand or 2,000 Rand or 10,000 Rand, into this bucket. And this bucket is supposed to maintain everybody's property, right? So we need to make sure that, number one, everybody in the estate or everybody in the body corporate or in the in the sectional title is paying and is up to date. Because if you are paying and your neighbor's not paying, and then your neighbor's house burns down, you are going to be liable to pay for that. Like, the body corporate is going to pay for it, which means they're going to be benefiting from that. Or there's grass that needs to be cut. Your neighbor's not paying for the grass and their grass is getting cut. That seems a little bit unfair, right? Or some body corporates even use shared electricity and shared water, right? So, and they will apportion it depending on your usage. So there is like a communal living that you need to do. And so when you're buying into a sectional title, one of the first things that you want to do, even before you get your heart set on this sectional title, is to make sure that the sectional title finances are in good standing. What does that mean? You can request a copy of the latest AGM, which is the annual general meeting, from the agent that is selling the property or whoever you're looking to buy the property from. Ask them for the AGM and you're going to be reading that. The second thing that you're going to be looking for is the financials, right? You're making sure that the financials of that sectional title are up to date. Nobody owes a lot of money. People are paying on time and the payments seem regular and consistent, right? What you don't want is like for people to be debt collecting, right? So like 1 month we're paying 50,000, then there's some months that people are not having money and then they disappear, and then because that is a legal process then that unfortunately then the body corporate has to pay legal services to pay because Mang Mang didn't pay for their things, right? So there's like a trust that you kind of need to opt into for those kinds of things. So once you've established that the finances are in good standing, the next thing that I want you to do is to understand if there are going to be any like major renovations or major decisions that have been made by the body corporate, because what that generally affects is going to be the rates or the levies that you pay. Because sometimes what happens is, as a body corporate last year, they decided, okay, they're going to renovate the pool. The pool is not necessarily part of like the normal wear and tear or the normal operational budget of the levies that they set aside. And so they may call on what is like a special levy, right? So they will say, okay, because we want to renovate the pool and the pool is going to cost 200,000 Rand and there's 20 houses, every house has to pay 1,000 Rand extra, right? That's basically how we're going to fund this pool renovation. The AGM meeting states that very clearly, because sometimes, especially what happens is that special levy will go on for a couple of months or a couple of years, depending on the size of the project. Generally, special levies are periodic, right? And they're for big things, right? So if everybody's roof needs to be replaced or they want to do like a huge painting job, that is what in the AGM notes, the special levy will be called on for. What you want to look out for, and you just want to be aware, right? It's not like a decision, you need to make the decision, is if you are walking into or opting into a body corporate decision where there is going to be special levies, because that is going to affect you, right? Because as soon as I walk into or I sign and I become part of the sectional title, I am then going to be liable for that 10,000 Rand or that 1,000 Rand extra every month for the next 10 months on top of my normal levies, right? Because I've got the normal levies that cover the gardening and the maintenance of like normal things, and then I've also got the special levy. It's a big trap, and it's something that, like, if you are going to be opting into a body corporate, just make sure you ask. If it's not clear in the resolution or in the AGM meetings, ask your agent to say, is there any special costs or any special levies or any resolutions or decisions that the body corporate have made that are going to impact me financially. It may not even impact you financially, right? You could go into a body corporate, into a sectional title. They have a pool, and then in 6 months' time, they've decided no. 6 months ago they decided no, they're going to close the pool, or they're going to cover it up, or they're going to do something else, right? So make sure that you are familiar with what is happening in the body corporate, especially if it's a big body corporate, right? So because generally what happens with the smaller units is like, people will chat and like, it's fine or whatever. But if it's a big property and it's a big development, make sure that you are like acutely aware of what's happening within the next couple of, in the foreseeable future. That is for sectional title. The second way that you can buy a property, or the second scheme that you can buy then, is in a freehold. So a freehold is when you own the land, you build, or there's a piece of property on the land and that property belongs to you. You then pay rates and taxes directly to the city. In a freehold or in a sectional title, you pay those costs to the municipality. You will pay them to the body corporate, and the body corporate may pay it onto the municipality. But in a freehold, you are responsible for the maintenance of your own property, right? You need to make sure that your grass is mowed. If the roof blows off, you are going to be the person that is going to fix it. You are also going to be the person that is insuring, right, the property. It's a big thing. And then you are also then the person that's going to maintain it, right? So if it needs to be painted, you can't look to body corporate, even if you are in a group of, in an estate, then it's your house, right? You must take care of it. All sides, inside and outside, it's your responsibility. There are schemes, so I live in a freehold, but in like a complex setting where we are all sectional title, but we have shared areas, right? So we pay a little bit just for the shared area. So we've got like a little gate that we pay for. We'll pay for the gate. If there's a security guard, you pay for the little bit for the security guard. But effectively, you are in a freestanding house. This also means that if your house burns down, it is your house that burns down. You need to repair it. You need to replace it. If you're in a body corporate, you are insured within the body corporate scheme, right? So that's just the difference. The big thing is maintenance, and the big thing is responsibility. So the responsibility is vested with the body corporate in a sectional title, but it is vested with you as the homeowner in a freehold. Which scheme do I prefer? It makes no difference. It makes a difference because it's a budget thing, right? So generally, sectional titles can be a little bit more expensive because, you don't really have a say on how often they paint. You don't really have a say on how often they change the roof, right? In your own property, you can paint every 5 years or every 10 years or every 20 years, right? Or choose never to paint. Or you may, they may want to replace the windows from steel to aluminium. You couldn't be bothered because you don't have the money. So, generally, when you are buying and when you're budgeting, think around those things. It's obviously very helpful to be in a sectional title because, again, you don't have to worry about those things. They'll get taken care of. So there's like pros and cons for both schemes. Okay, so after I have looked at my AGM for my sectional title, I'm then able to determine what my budget is. What is the maximum or minimum, effectively, amount of money that I'm going to be spending in a property? So if you are sectional title, it's going to be your bond, which is what you're paying to the bank, and then it will be what the levies are, and then sometimes it'll be rates and water separately, and sometimes it'll be electricity separately, right? Sometimes the levies cover both water and electricity, and so you only pay that levy fee, right? And that levy can range depending on the size and like how nice the complex is, right? Sometimes you go into like really nice complexes and they've got a pool and they've got beautiful gardens. They're paying the levies, right? Someone is paying for that. It's not just, whatever. So your levies could go up to 4,000 Rand, 5,000 Rand, 6,000 Rand on top of your bond. So when you're calculating whether or not you can afford a place, you need to have that number, right? If there's special levies, then it's going to be your bond, 10,000 Rand, plus the 4,000 Rand levies, plus the 2,000 Rand special levies that you're going to be paying for the next year or 2 months, right? So that whole 16,000 Rand is then what you're going to be paying on a monthly basis. On the other side, though, is if it's a freehold, you need to budget and you need to make sure that you have enough money for your own bond, which is the normal same bond that you would be paying, 10,000 Rand per month. But you also then need to budget for things like your insurance. Your insurance, home insurance, covers everything that if you were going to turn your house around and shake it, that is what your house insurance cost or your building insurance covers, right? So if you were going to turn your house around, shake it, everything that doesn't fall out, that belongs to your house. So the roof, the windows, the doors, the floors, the electricity, the plugs, the the curtain rails, right? Those are the things that are built into the house. Your kitchen cupboards, those are the things that are built into the house that do not belong to the house. Everything else you need to cover for in household insurance, but you need household insurance for both, right? Those are the things the loose things like your couch, your TV, your laptop. Okay, maybe not laptop, but like, you know what I mean? Those things that are loose, those are the things that you pay for when you are paying for household insurance. But if you're paying for your home insurance, like the house, the property insurance, the building insurance, that is what you're covered for. So shake your house, everything that stays, everything that stays, that is what you are insured for. And that is obviously insured on a sliding scale, depending on how big your house is, how many square meters there are, the materials that it's built out of, if it's got thatch, if it's not thatch, if it's close to something, like if it's close to your neighbor's house, if it's not close to your neighbor's house, if it's a double story, right? The insurance company usually will come out and do an assessment, and then they will assess and give you a rate based on that. That is basically like the insurance that you need to cover. Then obviously there's maintenance, right? So maintenance or monthly, let's call it monthly costs. So your monthly costs in your house is going to be what you're paying you're paying for refuse, you're paying basically your utilities, right? So you're paying for refuse, you're paying for water, and then you're paying for your electricity. The refuse is what the utilities is what you will pay the city, right? So the city then will charge you for your rubbish removal, they will charge you for your water, and then they will also charge you the rates for the property itself, right? So because you are on a piece of government land, you pay rates for that land depending on the earth size, depending on how big your house is or the square meters that the land takes. That is something that you pay separately, and again, that is based on your area, that is based on the value of the property, that is also then based on the size of the property. So those are fees that you are able to, that you need to determine and find out how much those are. Generally, rates and taxes don't change that much. They obviously do increase, and this is why we're always fighting with the government. But your previous owner will be able to tell you, like, okay, how much the rates and taxes are, or your neighbors will be able to tell you how much rates and taxes they are paying for their property, and then you pay that directly to the city. Then obviously there's electricity, which if you are in a freehold, right? It's your own property. You live by yourself. You may have prepaid, but you also may have postpaid electricity that you can sort out for yourself. So those are all the costs that are that are involved effectively in running your house, right? I'm not even talking about like the other things that you need to make sure, like maintenance and all of that stuff. So now you've decided, okay, I'm going to be buying a sectional title and I like this property. I've spoken to the estate agent because Nyaki said I need to do that, and I've gotten the AGM details and I've read the AGM, and nothing is untoward. The financials look good. Nobody's owing money. In fact, we actually have a surplus of money. We've got a 200,000 Rand surplus in the financials, and that looks good because when I look at what we spend, we only spend 20,000 Rand, right? So there is money if anything happens. If they do need to have any kind of special maintenance, they'll probably take it from the kitty, which is perfect. Then I am ready to make an offer, right? Generally, what can happen with when you decide to make a property is that you can go in pre-approved, or you can take the offer, you can take the property to the bank and ask them to approve you. So if you go in pre-approved, what you are doing is that you are walking into your bank or into your wherever you're going to get your loan from and saying, I want to see how much I can afford, right? Based on all the money that I make and all the money that I spend, I want you to tell me what is the property value that I can afford. And I want you to approve my property value so that when I go in to make an offer, the person that I'm buying from knows that, okay, the bank stands on this, or the bank agrees with me. What the bank will do then is that you will fill in a form. if you are getting pre-approved, whether you're getting pre-approved or post-approved, doesn't matter. It's basically the same process. You will fill out a form to say what your income is. If you are applying together, right? If you've got two incomes, then you will apply the both of you. Depending on how you are married, also it's like a weird thing, but you will apply together or you apply separately, doesn't matter. And then you will obviously list your expenses. This is where a lot of people like under list their expenses, and this is where in 6 months time, when your bond increases by 10%, which it may do, you start melting because now you realize actually you are drowning. You're literally living above your means. So at this stage already, make sure that you are overstating your expenses, because what you don't want to do is that you don't want to qualify for a house that you actually can't afford. Because I will tell you, the banks will very easily make you believe that you can qualify for a house that you can't afford based on what your income is, right? So generally what they will do is that your bond is going to be about 10% of the purchase price. So if it's a 3 million rand house, your bond is going to be 30,000 rand. If you earn, say for example, 50,000 rand, the bank will be like, yeah, you earn enough, right? You earn 50,000 rand, you're going to be paying 30,000 rand, so therefore 20,000 rand are your expenses. If your expenses are 25,000 rand on a month, you cannot afford that house. Do not attempt to buy that house, because money is not going to just magically appear, right? Unless you've got a plan for that money to be magically appearing. Think about it, because what I've just said about all your other expenses is that the bond is going to be the lowest amount that you're going to be paying. So on a 3 million rand house, you can pay that 30,000 rand per month, but there's also going to be levies if you are in a sectional title. There's going to be insurance and other things that you're going to be paying for if you're in a freehold, as well as all your rates and taxes and all your other expenses that are going to amount to an additional, 10,000 rand. So effectively, you are going to be paying on a 3 million rand house, you're going to be paying 40,000 rand per month. On a 50,000 rand salary, does that make a little bit of a difference? Yes, because now your expenses have now increased significantly your expenses are no longer 20,000 rand anymore. Now they are 30,000 rand. And so now you don't have enough money. So think about those expenses. I know it's very tempting to be like, oh, well, the bank says I can. The bank will. It's their job. They literally make money off you making like bad financial decisions. So make sure that it is the bare minimum, right? And it's obviously difficult because, houses are expensive and all of that stuff. But think about all of those costs before you take the plunge and before you start looking. Right? So you go in and then you get pre-approved and the bank says, okay, cool, your salary matches, you can buy a house. You can then go and look for a house for 30,000. My caution and my advice, and I think I said this to a friend of mine before, is that if the bank approves you for 30,000 rand, or if the bank says that your bond is 30,000 rand, let that be the all-inclusive cost of your property, right? So if you are going to get a bond for 30,000 rand, or you are approved for 30,000 rand, then buy a house for 2.5 million rand, because then you're not having to pay that 30,000. And I'm just using those examples. It's not exactly the numbers, but right, rather have a bond that you're paying 25,000 rand, then the 5,000 rand is going to be going to expenses. That's how you get to the 30,000. It's just my advice. Take it, leave it. Don't listen to me. Who am I anyway? I'm just the person on the internet not giving you financial advice. So that is my suggestion. So the bank goes and they tell you, cool, you can do this. Then what happens is that you put in an offer to purchase, right? So you see Candace, she is the estate agent. She's showing you the house and you're like, Candace, this is the house of my dreams. I'm definitely buying it and I want it. What you then do is you put in an offer to purchase. An offer to purchase, look at me in my face when I say this, is a legally binding contract. Do not put in an offer to purchase if you do not have the funds to be able to legally pay for this house, because you cannot pull out, right? It's not like, oh no, I put in 3 offers and this one came through and these other 2. No, one offer, one time. If the buyer accepts that, you are legally bound to that document. They can come for you. It's a document. It's a contract that you've signed that you are going to pay this amount of money to for this property, right? Where the offer to purchase where you can slip out of it is if you're not pre-approved and the bank declines you and then, they obviously have to let you go. But if the bank says yes and you put in an offer and the buyer says yes, ma'am, the house is yours. Congratulations, you're a mom, right? So don't put in an offer to purchase if you are not 100% sold on this property. So once you've made an offer, what will happen is they will ask you whether you are bond approved, right? So when you're making an offer, you will basically able to tick whether you're whether you're bond pre-approved or not. If you are not bond pre-approved, which is totally fine, you don't have to be bond pre-approved to do this process, is that then you will go in with your offer to purchase to your bank or other banks. My advice is to go to all the banks, right? Or go through a bond originator. A bond originator will basically, like Better Bonds or OBO or whatever, they will basically consolidate all the offers that the bank will give you, right? So Standard Bank will give you this, Nedbank will give you this, F&B will give you this. For whatever reason, and this has been true for me and for other people, is your bank, the one that you bank with, the one that know you and apparently like you but don't trust you, for whatever reason, never give you the better rate, which is weird. And I think it's suspicious. But anyway, so generally the banks will, the bond originator will then give you like different options. So they'll sell you, Standard Bank gives you this at this percentage. This will give you, they will give you this 100% loan or 90% loan with this much interest, or they'll give you 100% loan with this much interest, right? So you must then do the calculation to see on your 3 million rand bond, how much you're going to be paying within the month, and then how much, so every month, and then how much you're going to pay in your entire lifetime based on the interest. The best way to do this, I promise you, is just to put it in the AI. So ChatGPT or Claude or whoever, this is my purchase price. This is the rate that Standard Bank have given me. You can give them, just upload the letter. This is the rate that Nedbank have given me. This is the rate that so-and-so have given me. Which is the better option? And basically it will calculate based on if you've got a deposit, if you've got installments, what the interest rate is going to be, what the terms are, right? If there's any special terms. Depending on that, you will get the answer to see like which is the better offering. What you want to be able to do is, obviously you want to pay, like, it's a bit of a double-edged sword, right? You want to pay the lowest amount of money right now, but you also want to make sure that you are paying like the lowest amount in total, right, in the lifetime of your bond. Because what happens with the interest is that, and I'm sure you've seen it if you've done an interest calculation or a bond calculation, is that if the house is 3 million rand, right, the bank is going to loan it to you at, for example, 10% or whatever. So you will effectively end up paying the bond, you will end up paying the bank, say, and these are not real numbers, say 5 million rand, right, because of all the interest that you're going to be paying. That 5 million rand over 20 years, for example, that 5 million rand, you need to make sure that it's the lowest, like maybe another bank is going to get you to 4.8, right? Or another bank is going to give you to 6 million based on what your installments are. So, I mean, I guess you're at this point, you probably understand, like, the higher end of the installment, the lower the thing, the lower the installment, the higher the interest at the end. So basically that's what you're trying to calculate, right? And all of this in the affordability. What sometimes we do is that we live in hope. And it's fine, right? As an adult, as a young person, you must live in hope. But we have this hope that, okay, life is going to get better. Let me take a bond that I can't really afford right now, but I will be able to afford in in the next, because my life is going to get better. Okay, do it your way, right? Do it that way, like you can. Okay, I've seen people and they are like, okay, I can't, but the opposite is also true, right? You could lose your job, or you could downscale, or you could have another baby, and now all of a sudden your expenses have grown, right? So don't peg your right now decisions on your future financial prospects, right? Your decisions must be made like right now, real decisions on real money, not on hopes and dreams, because hopes and dreams are great because they're hopeful and we love hope and it makes us happy, but the opposite is true, right, as well, right? You don't want to have a property that you're stuck with, that you can't afford and you can't do anything about it, right? Because that's even worse. So let's not do that. So we've gone in and we've gone the bond originator, and ChatGPT has basically told us, okay, Nyaki, this is the best option for you. Great. Perfect. I like it. Then you accept you submit your, you you give, you'll tell the agents whatever that, okay, I've been approved for a bond and this is the bond that I've been approved. Then what happens is the agent will appoint attorneys, some sort of conveyancing process. And what they will do then is they will register the property. So they will basically to change the ownership registration details from, the house belonged to Mr. James and now it belongs to Nyaki Chabangu. And so they need to log it at the deeds office, which is basically like the repository of all houses and all properties for the government. So the government knows that this belongs to you, right? So that's a process. And then they need to register it in your name to say like, okay, this belongs to you. Generally, the lawyers will do that. The process, it can differ. It can take 6 weeks. It can take 2 months. I don't know they never tell you. But generally what happens with a bond originator is that they will keep you updated to say like, okay, your thing has been logged, whatever transfer, it's at the deeds office. Deeds office is signed off. It's now at the whatever. It's now at, so they will give you progress and keep you updated on what's happening with that. That process is not free. Okay. So on top of your bond, there is registration costs and there is transfer costs. There's costs that the owner will pay, so Mr. James will pay, and there's also costs that I, as Nyaki, the buyer, will pay. A lot of the costs are going to sit with me. Mr. James is going to generally will pay the agent whatever percentage that they've agreed on, and then Mr. James will also pay some sort of tax to the government because Mr. James made money on his property and now the government is coming knocking. But you will effectively then pay the registration fee or the transfer fee. The only time you may not pay transfer fees or registration fees or transfer fees, there's a fee that you won't pay, transfer fees, is if the property that you're buying from a developer, right? Which means it wasn't owned by anyone before, right? Mr. James, there's no Mr. James in the picture. It just went from the builder or the developer to you. That is generally with new buildings, you'll see like no transfer duty or no transfer fees. That is what that fee is. It's to say there's no fee, that Mr. James to Nyaki has to pay, which will mean that your property costs are a little bit lower. Sometimes, not all the time, the bank will give you that money. Not all the time, right? Most of the time, this is money that you have to pay over and above it, and it's a certain percentage. I'm sure you can do the calculation, or you can find out from Candace, your estate agent, what are the transfer fees going to be? What are the other fees that I'm going to be, attorney fees and transfer fees, what are they going to, how much are they going to be? Then once everything is done, then you may go into the lawyer's office, right? Wherever the lawyer is, to sign that, okay, this is your property, this is the purchase price, this is the fee that you're going to be paying, and then you pay them, the lawyers, to do all of that stuff, and then you get then they transfer, you get like a notice that says, okay, you get a deed of transfer. That deed then is logged at the deeds office. If you ever want to go and check up on it, you could go and just ask the deeds office, hey, I have a house, can you see the deed? And it's sitting over there. And then once that process is done, then Candace, your estate agent, will say, Nyaki, congratulations, your property has been logged and it is approved. It is now belongs to you. Here are the keys. So what sometimes happens in this process is when your property has been transferred to your name, it now belongs to you, right? But sometimes what happens is that if the person, Mr. James, is only going to move out in 2 months' time, Mr. James, because he's living in my house, can then pay me rental, right? Because he is living in my house now. It was his house. It's not his house anymore because the deeds office has already registered, right? So it's called occupational rental, right? Okay, so what may happen is that James will then, if he's staying in the property, right, he will then be subject to what is called occupational rental. This works two ways. So either James can pay me occupational rental because he's staying in longer than he's supposed to, or if I want to move in sooner, right, if I see the house and I'm like, this is the house, I don't even want to wait for the transfer, I can pay him occupational rental. I become his tenant, right? So you need to time or be able to time when your bond registration happens, because after the bond registration, someone is going to be paying someone, right? Either that person needs to be moved out the property and sometimes that doesn't always happen, or you need to be out the property, like, there's just like there's a timing that needs to happen. Otherwise someone is going to be paying occupational rent. It happens all the time. You just need to be aware of it. So what this means that if you're moving out of a place, you need to put in your notice to tell your landlord that, hey, I'm leaving. Otherwise, what can happen is that you get your transfer today, which is the 1st of March, but you haven't told your landlord. And so you still have to stay in the property from the 1st of March until the 1st of April. And you have to pay. Now you're paying both, right? Because as soon as you've gotten transfer, your bond kicks in. So they're going to, first debit order is going to come off, and then so is your rental agreement, your rental amount, or whatever the previous money that you're staying. So make sure that you're timing that correctly. And so it's quite important that you keep in contact with Candace, your estate agent, to be like, yo, Candy, what's the process? How far is it going? And generally they'll be able to give you, okay, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 2 weeks, 1 week to go. And so that's something that you just need to be aware of. Now we're going to talk about like inspections, right? So what do you look for when you are looking at a property? How do you actually like know whether or not this is a good investment, whether or not it's something that you should be buying? So me personally, I am not a fan of new builds. I'm not a fan of new builds because I have built new builds, right? I have built new houses in my life. And I know, especially in big developers, like in big developments, what goes on behind the scenes, and it is not cute. So what you're looking for in a new building, firstly, is that they have gotten their occupational certificate, right? So occupational completion basically says that the house is ready, that basically like the council have come and done their inspection and people can safely live in this house. So if it's a new build, like completely new build, the NHBRC, which is what does NHBRC stand for? National Home Builders Regulation Council, right? This is basically like the council that provides, like, it's the ombudsman for property. They basically have 3 guarantees. So they've got a minor defect, and then they've got like structural defects. So within the first 90 days, you are covered for poor workmanship against minor defects, right? Generally, what will happen in this period is if there's an architect or a builder on site, this is when they will do the snagging. And if you are buying within those 90 days, be part of that snagging process. Snagging is basically when you walk around the development, especially if they're building it like for you or you're building it off plan, to see whether or not things work the way that they're supposed to, right? So if the taps are being installed correctly, if the toilet flushes all the way, and it doesn't flush into a different toilet, because that happens, the doors work, right? They all have locks, all the hinges are on the doors, the lights work. New build, you have to test everything, because ultimately, like, nobody's ever lived in this property. You don't know what you don't know. It's a sink leaking. You don't know. You're only going to find out when you start using the washing machine, right? So being able to test all of those things. Generally what happens is the developer will take that into account while they're busy doing the process, but don't leave it up to the developer, right? This is going to be your house. Like, I know sometimes we think like, oh no, because it's a big purchase, someone is going to help me. Nobody's helping you, right? It's the same way that if you buy you buy something from, it's not even like you buy something from Takealot, because you can always take it back when it's from Takealot, but you can't take a house back, right? You buy it the way that you buy it. Like, even when you sign your offer to purchase, you're buying it foot to, the way that you buy it is the way that you buy it. There are obviously guarantees, and this is what the NHBRC gets into. So basically your snagging process, if you've built off plan, if you haven't built off plan and you're not like in that snagging process, but it is still a relatively new build, so the NHBRC does cover, the developer will also cover the structural components of the house for about 5 years. Structural components are cracks, not settlement cracks. So how we measured it, and I say we because I used to be in the built environment, is if you can take a 20 cents coin and you can shove it into the crack, that is a structural defect. Anything else is not structural. They'll just tell you we need to put some paint over it. That is for your responsibility, not the builder. You cannot, after 3 years, when there's a crack on the wall, be like, oh, well, there's a crack on the wall, the builder must come in and fix it. The builder's not going to come in and fix it. That is settlement, right? It's part of normal wear and tear of a property. Even the NHBRC is going to be like, what are we expecting? It's a house, like, it cracks. But structurally, right, if you can throw a 20 cents or you can fit a 20 cents coin inside of a crack, structurally the NHBRC will come in, and that's probably a bigger defect, right? So you're looking for things like that. The second thing you're looking for especially in a new build, if you are buying a house with a roof, is that the roof is not leaking. What you want to do, trust me, you want to buy after the rains, right? Make sure the house has seen its first rain. And when I say rain, I mean the catastrophic kind of rain, because new builds and roofs, actually any house with a roof, is just a disaster. So make sure that you are looking for that. I also like to look for fresh paint spots. So if someone's just recently painted, they're probably trying to cover something up. Just ask the question, like, why was this recently painted? If you can see that it's been recently painted. The third thing that I like to check, so you always want to check for cracks, obviously, like structurally. You also want to check for water, anything that has to do with water. Water is probably the most annoying and the most difficult problem to solve for in a house, whether it's new or old. You want to check for leaks. You want to check for plumbing. You want to check that things flush correctly. You want to check for pipes, that things are flowing, right? Just flow, because water needs to flow. Any kind of water that stands is going to be a problem. So you want to checking for damp, if there's rising damp, if there's leaking, that kind of thing. This is for new builds. Obviously, it's going to be difficult because nobody actually lives there, but in an old house as well. Me personally, I prefer older properties, right? The house that I bought was built in 1989. And the reason why is because I believe in strong bones, right? I'm one of those people who are like, yeah, no, this one, strong bones. But obviously buying old comes with its own challenges, right? Because a lot of the time, especially like older properties, need major renovations, right? So you're going to need possibly a new bathroom. You're possibly going to need a new kitchen, right? You're possibly going to have to change some of the plugs because maybe they don't work. But when you are buying your house, when you do get transfer, part of the process is going to be a COC, so electrical certificate of compliance. So you will have an electrician come in to make sure that your house is not going to burn down because the plugs are not correct. And then, you kind of get the certificate. But check all of those things, right? If it's an old house and you are planning on doing renovations, walk around with a builder or someone that knows a little bit about construction so you can kind of get a guesstimate on how much things are going to cost. Don't assume like, oh no, it's just a little kitchen, we'll just, spend a little. No, kitchens are very expensive to do. Bathrooms are really expensive to do, right? So if you are buying an old building or a building that you're going to renovate or a building that you want to do some work to, have that quotation or have that estimate in there before you make any major decisions. Okay, so this has been a long video, but I think it's been comprehensive enough for you to kind of understand what are the costs that you need in order to buy a house and then the process that's involved. So breaking it down is a deposit. Sometimes you may need a deposit, sometimes you may not, but you need to factor that in. Then there is bond registration costs, which is what you will pay to the lawyers or to the agencies or whatever, who are the people. The transfer costs, the attorney fees. One of the things that we always forget is the moving costs, right? Because if you're moving from somewhere, how's your stuff going to get into the new place? You need to factor that in. And then there may be times that you need to buy new appliances or furniture, right? Because if you're moving from a 1-bedroom apartment to a 3-bedroom house, trust me, you don't have enough furniture, right? You may need a new fridge because it doesn't fit or whatever. So think about those costs that are involved in moving. And then obviously you need to make sure that you get a decent insurance before you buy a house, especially an old house. And before you do any major renovations, make sure your insurance company understands what you are trying to do, because what happens sometimes is that we renovate our properties and then they're not compliant, right? So for example, we installed gas and we needed to make sure that our insurance, number one, was going to cover the gas installation and that the gas installation was installed in a compliant way. Because if it's not, then the insurance companies be like, but what were you doing when your house burns down? And that's not what you want. Okay. So overall, buying a house can be a little bit daunting because you are making a big purchase, but it shouldn't be overwhelming, right? It shouldn't be something that cripples you with fear and anxiety. It is a little bit complicated, but it's not that complicated. Like don't let anybody make it feel like it's something that's unattainable. It's not unattainable. You can absolutely do it if you can afford it. The biggest thing is to make sure that you can actually afford the decision that you're going to make and that you're going to be able to sustain that decision, right? Because if your life is going to change in the next 5 years, maybe buying a house right now is not not the best idea for you. So think about things like that before you buy a property. But, do it, because you live once and money's for spending anyway. This is obviously not financial advice in any way or capacity. If you say Nyaki said, I don't even know you, bro. I don't know you. So I'm not going to say anything. So please do your own research if you are looking to buy a property. And I'll see you somewhere on the internet. Bye.